Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast. We are out here doing a live trade deadline, sort of anticipate the trade deadline and react to what's going on. There's been a flurry of trades already and a few that affect the Seahawks, whether by the Seahawks or by rivals and division members of the Seahawks. Adam, what are you seeing out there today?
I mean, obviously the biggest one is the trade for Leonard Williams. The Seahawks send a second-round draft pick in 2024 and a fifth-round draft pick in 2025 to the Giants for the 7-year veteran, adding him to what's already a really deep interior defensive line rotation. I mean, with guys like Jaron Reed, Mario Edwards, and Draymond Jones, another interior defensive lineman didn't seem like a big position of need, but I think the Seahawks idea is let's continue to build upon our strength, which right now is the defense.
Oh, 100%. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that particular trade once the hosts of the 12 Talk podcast jump on. I'm sure they'll have a lot of insight into that particular move.
Undoubtedly. The other two ones that you were alluding to is first of all, the 49ers continue to add to their pass rush rotation, trading a third-round pick, which I still can't believe the Washington parted with this guy for a third-round pick. But Chase Young going to San Francisco for a third-round pick. That's scary. Even though the 49ers already have, I think, what many consider one of the best, if not the best, defense in the NFC. They decide to trade for another guy to add to that pass rush rotation. I'm confused as to where they're getting this money. I know that he's not on a big money contract right now, still on his rookie contract, and maybe they're kind of looking at this as a move for the future. But like, where's this guy going to fit in? Didn't they just acquire a pass rusher not too long ago from another team? I feel like they did. Didn't they sign someone else earlier this year?
Probably. It's the 49ers. They find ways to.
Was it Randy Gregory was released? Oh, yeah, from the Denver Broncos.
That is correct.
Now, don't get me wrong. Chase Young is an upgrade on Randy Gregory, but Randy Gregory still obviously has some pass rush in him. So, yeah, this is another one of those, like, I guess again adding to what's already your strength. Goodness knows their offense has been exposed over the last several weeks. So, yeah. That was a little scary. The other one that kind of, I don't know if it really affects the Seahawks. We will be seeing them at least one more time this year, and that is the Arizona Cardinals. I guess I don't know if this is good news for Kyler Murray fans or the Cardinals just are afraid that Josh Dobbs might actually eke out a win at some point. So they offloaded Josh Dobbs to the Minnesota Vikings, who obviously made that trade due to the Kirk Cousins ACL tear. Achilles
tear.
Sorry, Achilles tear. He will be out for the rest of the season. They are still looking like they're going to be starting Jaron Hall this coming week, but obviously looking to upgrade the backup, I guess, quarterback position. Because, you don't trade for Josh Dobbs in the hopes that he's going to come in and win you some games. So I'm just assuming this is a depth thing. Or, for Adam's conspiracy theory corner here, the Vikings are attempting to tank for a high draft pick, and that's why they brought in Josh Dobbs, seeing how well he's led the Cardinals to several defeats in a row, I guess.
There you go. They need to build some pieces for the future. The Vikings have Kirk Cousins, let's just say, is not a spring chicken anymore. And I believe he was drafted in like 2009, maybe. Same year as Sam Bradford, I think.
Kirk Cousins was drafted in 2012 along with Russell Wilson.
Oh, you're right. You're RG3, those guys.
RG3 and Andrew Luck. So he's not quite that. He's not that old. He's not that young, but he's not that old. No, Kirk Cousins is still a viable quarterback in this league. I mean, obviously, you need to see what he looks like coming back from an Achilles tear. That's a pretty significant injury, even for someone at the quarterback position. I mean, I believe it's on that plant foot, his left foot, which you've got to be able to plant in order to throw. So yeah, I mean, and who knows? He's in a contract year 2, so who knows if he was in the Vikings' long-term plans anyway. I obviously, like I just said, I think this kind of looks like the Vikings are thinking about the future. In this case, I think they're thinking about tanking for a better draft pick, or they just have a lot of faith in Jaren Hall, which I could also get behind because I mean, goodness knows I like Jaren Hall coming out of college, BYU quarterback. We thought he had something to give this league. Maybe that's it. Maybe they just see something in him and just want another guy with a little bit of get up and go because Jaren Hall is a dual threat quarterback. They wanted somebody else to come in that has a similar skill set so that they could tailor make the offense around Jaren Hall and not lose a step in case something else happened there. So who knows? But yeah, the Vikings trading for Josh Dobbs is a little bit of a shocker. I mean, you've got guys like Carson Wentz out there on the street. There's another guy, I think, with the Texans, former Vikings quarterback, former Broncos quarterback, whose name is escaping me, but he led the Vikings to a 13-win season several seasons ago. Not Kellen Mond. I'm gonna have to look this up, folks. Sorry. In any case, there are several other options out there for the Vikings to trade for quarterbacks. So this one's a little bit suspect to me. I'm not exactly sure what they were thinking, but again, like I said, it may be they're looking to tank, or it may be that they are tailor making an offense around a mobile quarterback and wanted somebody else to come in that had a similar skill set.
Well, and Josh Dobbs has experience, right? So he is not, though he hasn't played a lot of games, he also has been in the league for 3-4 years. Right. So, he was with the Steelers for a long time. He bounced around. This is his second time being traded this year, going from the Browns to the Cardinals, and now the Cardinals to the Vikings. He might just have a mentality and a skill set that they think will be useful in that locker room with Kirk Cousins going down. We don't know what their long-term plan is, but it's something we'll definitely keep an eye on. And Viking Mitch Mazzio is set to join us at some point here in the next 2 hours. So I'm sure we'll dive into all things Vikings and NFC North when he shows back up.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting getting Josh's take on that because, again, Case Keenum, by the way, was the name of the quarterback I was thinking of. Case Keenum, former Viking great, led the Vikings to I believe it was a 13-win season, but led them to the playoffs. And I believe a playoff win the year that he was the starting quarterback for them. But in any case, there was plenty of options. So I still, have questions about that. We got another trade that just came in. The Lions have traded the Browns a 2005 sixth round pick for wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. My apologies. Another interesting move. That's another team it seems to be adding something to a room that's already pretty much a strength for them. I mean, they've got a pretty deep bench of wide receivers over there behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. So curious. I haven't really seen a move yet where I'm like, oh, someone's adding a piece that they needed. The only one that I think that we didn't mention yet that makes a ton of sense was the Eagles trading for Kevin Bayard, the safety at Tennessee, which obviously was a need for them in the secondary and a huge upgrade. So far, outside the Seahawks, I think adding a great piece in Leonard Williams, the Eagles have made the best trade of the trade deadline. Although, again, San Francisco only having to give up a third-round pick for a talent like Chase Young.
Steal.
Yeah, not happy about that.
So we'll go into a few rumors that are out there. First, I'm going to recap who was dealt kind of before this week, just to kind of catch up with the rest of October. You mentioned it before. We had Randy Gregory going from Denver to San Francisco earlier in October. That's about the same time Chase Claypool moved. Chicago moved on from him. He had a rocky tenure with the Bears, and they shipped him off to Miami.
Yeah, blocking nightmare Chase Young. Go back and watch some of his tape. Those were some. After watching that game where he basically was a turnstile in the run game, I can see why they moved on from Chase.
Talking about Claypool or Young?
Yes, Claypool.
All right.
Yeah, no, his as a run blocking wide receiver, he's not very good. Like if you want just whatever the opposite of DK's block for Jackson Smith and Jigba for the game-winning touchdown was last week, that is what Chase Claypool looks like on the field blocking. Just a turnstile. So.
All right. Well, let's see. Also, earlier in October, we had Van Jefferson going from the Rams to the Falcons. McCole Hardman Jr. going from New York to Kansas City.
Another guy that Kansas City didn't re-sign after last season, let him go and sign with the Jets, only to then give up a draft pick. Some interesting moves by these, what are, and you're going to love me saying this, ostensibly smart front offices.
Yes. All right. And then Terrell Edmonds moved last week. And on that same day, Kevin Baird also moved. So Philadelphia, that was in the same trade. So Philadelphia sent Terrell Edmonds to Tennessee, and Tennessee in turn sent Kevin Baird to Philadelphia. I don't have all the compensation for that trade in front of me, but I imagine there were some picks that also moved because those two players aren't level.
Equal. Another trade just came in. Jacksonville Jaguars are trading for the Vikings starting guard Ezra Cleveland. This is another interesting one. Ezra Cleveland, I think, was a second-round draft pick a couple of years ago. Looks like so he's still dealing with a foot injury, it looks like. But it looks like he's scheduled to come back fairly soon. And they only get a 6th-round draft pick for a guy that they spent a 2nd-round draft pick on not more than a couple of years ago. So some interesting moves out of the Vikings front office. I am really interested in getting Mitch's take on this. You're giving up on a pretty good starting guard. Now the guy that they've had, Tyler Shatley, who they've had coming in, taking over for Ezra Cleveland while he's recovering from that foot injury, has played fairly well. The Vikings offensive line is one of the top-rated offensive lines in the league in pass protection. So maybe they thought they were good without him, but not much of a return for a guy that you spent a high draft pick on.
No, absolutely. In fact, I'm bringing up Ezra Cleveland's PFF profile here real quick. Let's see how he's been graded out the past few years. I remember liking him coming out of Boise State. He was somebody I was kind of intrigued with in that 2020 draft. Thought he might fall a little further, but he was selected there at the end of the 2nd round. 2023, he's graded out at a 73.8. I can't complain.
Is that his overall grade?
Yes. Apparently on this computer, I'm not signed in. So give me 2 seconds. I'll sign in so I can get more advanced.
This is Robbie's issue with having his empire of multiple screens going at the same time. He never knows which devices he's signed in on and which devices he's not.
Well, the worst part about that is I have this computer here, and that has my mouse and keyboard in front of me. But then the screen that is off to this side is controlled by the laptop over here. So I have to type over here and look this way. Normally, I don't do things on that. I just have things up on the screen as reference points. But today, and I imagine draft day as well, I will have to get used to typing with my head turned almost all the way around.
Little peek into how the sausage is made here at Let's Talk Seahawks.
And that will not be the first time. It won't be the last. That is not the first time. It won't be the last time. But I just grabbed the wrong mouse and tried to figure out why my screen was not responding.
It's the joys of doing things live.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good pickup by the Jacksonville Jaguars. In fact, PFF already has Ezra Cleveland assigned to the Jaguars. They're pretty quick on that.
Wow.
So once again, we will revisit this topic once Viking Mitch is able to join us.
Go ahead.
Let's see. I was just going to continue going through rumors that have hit in the last 2 days, kind of players to be watching out for. Let's see. So there's a rumor the Steelers are open for business. We haven't seen any moves with the Steelers. It's something Mike Tomlin said. We're always open for business, but that's how I would be as a front office person. I'm like, hey, I will listen to any offer that you give me.
That's John Schneider's mantra, or what Pete Carroll always says is they're in on every trade. So it'll be interesting to see what the Seahawks were willing to offer the Arizona Cardinals for Josh Dobbs, seeing as they're in on every trade. I'm assuming it was some practice equipment and a signed DK Metcalf jersey with a message specifically for Buda Baker, but hopefully nothing more was on offer than those items.
Okay, let's see. The Titans have come out and said that Derrick Henry is unlikely to be traded. So once again, I think all teams are in that we'll listen to the offer, but you need to blow us away mode.
Yeah, we know that. We know what that means. The Seahawks said a very similar thing about Russell Wilson. So I don't know who's going to be trading much for Derrick Henry at this point. Look, he's still a very effective running back, but obviously a guy on the wrong side of 30 with his contract is very unlikely to be moved. He doesn't bring a lot of skill sets to an offense. I mean, Derrick Henry is just a downhill runner. Not a bad thing, obviously, but not what a lot of offenses in the league right now are looking for their running back room.
If the Seahawks had Derrick Henry there against the Bengals, perhaps they wouldn't have tried to run shotgun plays on the half.
I mean, we had Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker against the Bengals. I believe both of those guys have a decent facsimile to a Derrick Henry in that both of them can run hard and one of them can run very fast. So I would Shane Waldron have called a little bit differently if he had a future Hall of Famer like Derrick Henry in the backfield? You would hope so, but my money is still on no.
Well, and the Seahawks don't have a pick that they can use for a running back, be it via trade or the draft, because we only use second round picks. And I'm sorry, but we sent that to New York in the Leonard Williams trade.
Yep. Yeah, I don't. What are your thoughts? I mean, we haven't talked a ton about the Leonard Williams trade up to this point, but I guess what are your thoughts on the Seahawks moves? Do you see another one coming, or do you think that's their big splash, and then we might see them offload a couple of guys, but not really see them bring a lot of other pieces in?
So this is interesting. I'll get more into this a little bit later when our guests show up, because I'm sure we'll dive deep into this Leonard Williams trade. But the most intriguing part about the trade was the escalation of the round, because originally it was a third round pick that then got bumped up to a second round pick because the Giants kept most of that cap. The Seahawks only have the prorated vet minimum for the rest of this year for his contract. The Giants are eating all the rest of his contract, which is right around $10 million. So that tells me the Seahawks
draft pick back, but that's just me.
We also have the Broncos third round pick in this coming draft. So we basically moved back 15 spots, if you want to think of it that way. But that tells me they're looking for more moves. Will they make one? We don't know. It kind of depends on how they feel about offensive line, because there are some slightly ominous news. Pete Carroll just did not give a very good update on Abe Lucas, and that injury isn't something that can go be surgically fixed. It's kind of this issue that's always bugged him with that knee, and he had it scoped earlier. He had an injection about a week and a half ago. Things are just not coming together for him. So are they looking for an established right tackle? Do they trust the Stone Forsythe, Jason Peters, Jake Curran recipe that they've been playing with there at right tackle? That's a move that I might see them making, is going out and getting somebody who could be available. But offensive linemen are hard to get.
I mean, except for there are guys out on the street right now who can come in and play starting right tackle. I mean, La'el Collins, I'm just going to say it again, is still out in the market. He is a very, very effective pass blocker. He's a little bit suspect sometimes in the run game, but I mean, if you just need a body in there that's going to keep somebody protected. Yes, Mitch, that's kind of the point we were making. Sorry, Mitch just chimed in with a little British Mitch just chimed in with a little right tackle by committee comment. Yeah, I don't want them to necessarily go out and sign La'el Collins, but to me that makes more sense than trying to trade for someone right now. Just because, look, especially the way the Seahawks have been hitting on draft picks these last 2 drafts, I would much rather have the draft capital for next year than a player that's going to come in and help us out a little bit, which is I know we'll get more into this later, but one of the issues I have with the Leonard Williams trade is sending those 2 draft picks over, especially the second round pick, knowing how well the Seahawks have done drafting in the higher rounds these last couple of years. That seemed like more of a prime pick. If we re-sign Leonard Williams and we have him on the roster for 2 or 3 more seasons, I'll obviously feel a lot better about it. But if it's just a 1-year rental, which has been a reoccurring theme for the Seahawks the last several years when they've made these big trades, these guys have been 1-year rentals. Whether it's the Jets or Vikings player that we traded for, Sheldon Richardson, from the Jets that we traded for several years ago. Jadeveon Clowney's another guy that we traded some high picks for and only ended up being a 1-year rental. So that's the only thing I'm worried about is are we going to get our value out of this? Now, if Leonard Williams comes in and the defense becomes a top 5 unit, even though we are already a top 5 unit when it comes to certain positions or certain aspects of the defense, I think we're a top 2 run defense right now. So, and a top 10 overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like we've got Viking Mitch with us today.
Viking Mitch.
Let's go ahead and add him to the stream.
Welcome back, sir.
Hey, how's it going, Adam and Robert? How are you guys doing today?
I don't know why I just yelled that, but
it's all good.
Make
sure I could hear, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. We're good. I could hear you.
I mean, especially with such a spacious home, I figure, that there's a lot of dead area I've got to fill with the sound for that to reverberate and get your ears. I'm, of course, talking about the background that you've chosen for yours.
Absolutely. Well, that fireplace I built by hand. So,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, Mitch, we've talked a little bit about the 2 trades the Vikings have been involved with so far before this trade deadline. Go ahead and give us what you're thinking about the acquiring of Josh Dobbs and the offloading of Ezra Cleveland.
Yeah, I honestly was a little surprised they offloaded Ezra. He hasn't been spectacular. I mean, I think he can play up to about an average level for an NFL guard. He's got good mobility, which is a big thing for the Vikings O-line, right? They kind of prioritize that athleticism over power. I could see where the trade makes sense for the Jaguars, right? It's a good fit. I can't remember the coach there, the O-line coach. He coached up here before, so he's familiar with Ezra. Big thing I think for the Vikings is on the offensive line front. They had signed Dalton Reisner to a deal here recently, and that's he's worked out really well the last couple of weeks in particular, especially when you watch that San Francisco game. That was an unbelievable performance. And from someone who has been a longtime Vikings fan, it's been a decade since I've seen the offensive line have a game like they did against the 49ers and that front 7, which we all know is one of the best in the NFL, right? To allow 0 sacks against a pretty non-mobile quarterback in Kirk Cousins is impressive. So I think the Vikings felt really good about their offensive line going forward. I think the 2 offensive tackles we have, they're the best at their position in the NFL, right? Like, it's hard to argue that there's another team that has better offensive tackles than this team. The interior is still a little soft up front, but Bradbury has really made some huge progress this year. He's yet to allow a sack, which is massive for the middle of that offensive line. And Ingram, who was the leaky point at right guard, has really started to establish himself, especially in the run game. So their offensive line, surprisingly to me, well, not really that surprising to me. I kind of predicted this, but I think to a lot of Vikings fans, it's kind of a shocker that this offensive line is playing as well as they are this year. As far as the Josh Dobbs trade, I think it's a really good pickup. They didn't give up anything for him of consequence. They didn't sacrifice the future. Currently, the way this team's constructed, they're in a competitive rebuild, right? So they're trying to make the playoffs, but they're not all in, right? This is not a team, even with Cousins. The organization didn't see this as like a deadlock, Super Bowl contender. We're just not at that stage, right? A lot of the players on defense have stepped up. Guys like Cam Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus, Ivan Pace, who I talked about on the previous time I was on this podcast, right? Put him at starting middle linebacker. Phenomenal. I mean, undrafted rookie, right? I mean, so they've got a lot of nice young pieces that have started to emerge on that defense. You got Brian Flores and that scheme that has worked out really well for us. And so, but Dobbs, he provides a really good veteran presence. I was really impressed actually with his transition from the Browns to Arizona because he had to learn that playbook on the fly and he started right away, right? I mean, that's impressive. So I think with this offense, especially if Justin Jefferson comes back, they could still have and provide a level of explosiveness because the O-line's playing well. We all know they've got really good weapons, especially with the emergence of Addison
Jordan
here.
Addison's been lights out the last several games.
He's been phenomenal. I love that kid too. He's a baller, right? The guy, I mean, you can see him make mistakes and then he comes back and fights, right? Like there's no better example of this in that Niners game because Tre'Davious Ward had took that ball from him early in the first quarter for that interception. And then later in the game, he did the same thing back to him for that 60-yard touchdown right before half. So, I mean, right, that just shows, right? It shows that resiliency. And so, I'm really excited. This is a good young team. I think in 24 here, looking a little bit forward, I know, but I think they're going to draft one of these excellent quarterback prospects that are coming out.
I guess that was the question. You think are they? I mean, again, Mr. Conspiracy me was thinking, trading with Josh Dobbs kind of looks like a tank move to me. I mean, obviously they've already said that they're going to be starting Jaron Hall next week, and they'll want to see what they have in him. And we were really high on Jaron Hall on the podcast for the draft. Really high. I mean, we thought he'd be drafted and he might have a shot to make a roster. And but by really high, I mean I think he's a talented guy who, in the right system, can be an effective quarterback.
Yes.
So, but again, if you're going with Josh Dobbs, it's not like Josh Dobbs has been winning any games this year. So, do you think that signals that they just want someone that's going to come in and facilitate, but not really give them much of a chance to continue winning games, just so they can up that draft pick value? And obviously, adding a third rounder, is it a third rounder or sixth rounder?
Sixth rounder for Ezra. Yeah, they didn't get a lot of compensation, which is fine. Yeah. Well, he's in the last year of that rookie deal, so they weren't going to get much for him, and he's not an outstanding player. He's average, right? So.
I mean, he's been a pretty decent pass blocker when he's been on the field. It's just that he's had a little bit of trouble staying healthy, obviously.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess the question is, you think they're going to be gunning for a first round quarterback next season?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think they're still trying to compete this year, right? So the thing with Jaron Hall, right? I love his instincts. I think he put on some really good college film. BYU, I think there's a lot to like about his game, but I mean, if we're being honest, he is undersized. He doesn't have that strong of an arm, right? And so he's got to be a little extra on those passes, right? To beat man coverage in the NFL level. So I mean, this isn't like, and on top of that, I mean, he's a rookie, right? He's never played. I mean, so I think this is more of, hey, we're going to throw Jaron out there. We're going to give a kid a shot, see where he's at. But we got Josh Dobbs back here just in case. And the way their schedule lines up right now, they play a lot of teams that are either right at that average level or really below average, frankly. So they've got a really soft schedule coming up. So I think they believe that they can win games with Josh Dobbs. And also, I think it was kind of the best of both worlds where they didn't give up much for him, but they've kind of got an insurance policy now in case Jaron really is bad, right? And that's within the realm of possibilities, especially considering his arm strength and those sorts of things. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I suspect that I was a little frustrated, to be honest, with the Dobbs trade. Not really because of the compensation, but just because it's like, I don't know if I really want to see Dobbs play the rest of the season, because what are we going to do? We're going to win.
Well, clearly
8 games,
Arizona and Cleveland
games.
didn't want to see Josh Dobbs play for the rest of the season. So you'd be right in line with the rest of the league up to this point.
Well, and it's true. I just get concerned because it's like, what are we doing with our draft capital when you get to 8 or 9 wins, right? And like a guy like Dobbs could help you. And here's the thing: when you look at Arizona and his time there, I mean, you're talking about a pretty atrocious roster, right? They don't have what we have on offense, right? They don't have a Justin Jefferson. Their one is what, Marquise Brown, good player, right? But I mean, let's be real, he's a 2, right? Or even maybe a 3 in a lot of offenses, right?
He's a deep threat. I mean, that's really his
deep threat. Yep.
His game.
I mean, he'd give you a little bit more than that, but I mean, you're not talking about a prolific pass catcher here, right? So I mean, it's that matters, right? And the Cardinals' old line, I mean, that's ugly, right? So
Well, we can say the same about the Cardinals' entire roster. That is a team that is deep into a rebuild right now, and
absolutely,
probably won't be competing for at least the next couple of years. Which again, I think makes a lot of sense. Maybe like I said, I think maybe they were worried Josh Dobbs might pull out a win, so they're offloading him in hopes of we got to bring somebody else in the tank. Josh Dobbs is getting too close to pulling out a win. So we'll see what happens with it when they finally do activate Kyler Murray. But yeah, I mean, my thing has been right now they're sitting at top of the draft pick with 2 primo picks in the first round. You got to think that their idea is we're going to be going for either May or Caleb Williams or one of those top tier guys.
I would be doing that in their situation because with Kyler Murray, I mean, the big knock on him is the work ethic, and I don't want to hear that with my quarterback, to be frank, right? Like, if that's a problem, like, time to move on, right? I mean, versus paying him. I mean, and yeah, that's an interesting one too. So, but yeah, I think the Vikings are going to target a first round pick in the draft next year. It just depends on how much compensation they're going to have to give up, because I think the front office here, they're ready. They're ready. They were looking last year. There was a lot of reports that they were looking hard at quarterback, and they really liked Anthony Richardson. So that was the guy they targeted. And of course, we all know the Colts picked him in the top 5, right? So, I mean, that kind of, but I feel like if he would have slipped into 10, 12, 13, 14 territory, the Vikings would have moved up and got him. That's where they were at with him. So I think they're going to be even more aggressive, considering Cousins is going to be 36 years old, coming off a torn Achilles, which we all know is a really devastating injury. Maybe not as much for a quarterback versus like a running back or receiver, of course. But, all those things add up to, the writing's on the wall. I think that they're going to go quarterback. And
is Cousins signed through next season? I thought this was the final year of his contract, isn't he?
It's his last year. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the big thing with Cousins, I actually think because of this injury, the Vikings are more likely to sign him now because of this injury. And the reason I say that is because had he played this season out, I mean, if you look at his numbers, they were incredible.
Yeah, he would have been looking for. I mean, when you have
I think a team would have given
Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison. It'd be pretty easy to put up those kind of numbers when you're throwing. Of course, the running game obviously wasn't doing you guys any favors. So
no, the running game has been rough, but you got to understand too, we have the highest pass rate in the NFL. So I mean, when we're talking about the run game being rough, it's like, well, you got to run the ball to actually know if you can run the ball. And now Madison has been terrible. I mean, frankly, he's dropped passes, he's fumbled the ball too much. He's indecisive when he's hitting holes. Bouncing outside sometimes when he should just go inside, going inside when he should bounce it outside. His vision, surprisingly, because, that's kind of the thing when he came out of college, he was known for great vision, good all around solid back, but he's really struggled this year in that number 1 role. So, I personally think they should play Cam Akers a lot more and give him some more carries. So, but yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a rookie on your squad that you guys need to give another chance to. I know he had a really bad start for you this season, but it was all on kick returns, which was never part of his game.
Sure. Oh, you're talking about McBride, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Dwayne McBride. Look, I still think the guy has a role. He's a very similar player to Cam Akers in that he's that guy that's going to be in the middle, kind of like pounding and punishing defenses. But Cam Akers, sure, yeah, he looked really good at times with the Rams, but I don't know. I'd give McBride chances first if I were the Vikings. See what you got in that draft pick. The guy's a manimal.
Yeah. He didn't show a whole lot in preseason. Ty Chandler clearly beat him out, and so it was. Yeah. And I get what you're saying, though. He did put some really good college tape on. So he looks like a dynamic, And the other thing with him too is he's not known for his pass catching chops either. So you're talking about a limited player in that respect too. And we all know with the modern NFL,
kind of bricks for hands there. So we were just talking about that. We were talking about Derrick Henry. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, because I know Robbie's itching to announce that we've got another guy joining.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. We get long-winded. Go ahead, Rob.
No, you're good. So apparently on the show today, other than having camera issues, as you can see right now, we have Mitch squared. So we have Viking Mitch over there and Seahawks Mitch from the 12 Talk podcast, a UK-based Seahawks podcast launching here in the next year. So welcome, Mitch. Well, and Mitch.
Thank you very much. Yeah, an extra Mitch just to make things not confusing. Thanks for having me on.
Have a backup.
Never run out of Mitch.
So since we've all kind of gotten, we kind of said our stuff, Mitch. Give us your take on some of the trades so far.
Well, I think Chase Young's the big blockbuster one today to the Niners, and I think it was crazy that anyone didn't see that one coming, because he's a star player with a horrible injury record, and that's basically all of their roster.
I love it.
I didn't think the Washington Redskins, the former Washington Expletives, the Commanders. I'm always going to call them that. It's just like Twitter. It's always
you got to run with the nickname the Commies. That's the only way to refer to them. The Commies. There it is. Right.
Love it.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So anyway, the Washington Commies, which could apply to the football team or half of Congress. There
you go.
Is, let's not get political on this podcast. But
Yeah,
after trading Montez Sweat, I did not see them offloading Chase Young as well. That was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, it feels a lot, doesn't it? It's the identity of their D-line, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Deron Payne is the one that I thought we thought he was going to move last year, and the Seahawks obviously were a trade target there. But, Washington's obviously back in rebuild mode. Clearly, their quarterback is not the quarterback of the future. And with new ownership, I'm sure that they are going to want to make a splash in this upcoming draft. Although, again, only getting a third-round pick for Chase Young doesn't seem like a big way to make a splash. Still can't believe that was the compensation.
I can't either. When I saw that compensation here, when that news broke here, an hour or two ago or something like that, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, how are there not other teams lined up to give a third-round pick to Chase Young? I mean, get the injury history, but wow, right?
Yeah, I think with Chase Young, the big thing is the injury record since he entered the league is bad. Anyone that trades is staring down the barrel of that extension with a very uncertain next 3 or 4 years. He hasn't quite hit the projected impact that he would have in the league, probably because in part to those injuries. But
he's Jadeveon Clowney 2.0. I thought he was that one coming out of college anyway. So
yeah, there's an element of that. It's just uncertain, isn't it? Whoever trades is committed to an extension. Although, are you committed when you've only given up a third-round pick? Maybe that is a get out for the Niners.
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Are they? They've already brought in. They brought in Randy Gregory over from the Denver Broncos earlier this season. Are they just looking? Is it just a way to bolster up this defense? Because I think they thought going into the season that they were going to be Super Bowl contenders with this roster, and as well as their, Mr. Irrelevant has been playing Brock Purdy, but he seems to have gotten exposed these last couple of weeks. Is going all in on this season still the right idea for the 49ers? This is the 49ers podcast, and I think the answer is no, because I would hope that they would lose anyway. But
I'm actually surprised that they're comfortable enough to continue that push, because Purdy really, I've been saying it since last year, right? Like Purdy, I think the easy knock on him is to say, look at that supporting cast, right? And I get that. But if you watch him play, he misses a lot of passes. And there's a lot of times where he isn't up to snuff. But, when you're dumping it off to CMC or Debo and they're ripping off, 20, 30-yard plays, it's like, that makes you look a lot better. So I think there was a little.
George Kittle.
What's that?
Or Brandon Ayuk or George Kittle. He's got nothing but weapons. But yeah, you're right. It's been very much Kyle Shanahan's is very much a first read offense. It's about, okay, this is who the play is designed to go to. Yep. Is that guy open? If not, okay, then we're dumping it off to again, whether you're coming out of the backfield with CMC or whoever their fullback was kind of like the big dump off guy last year or before the CMC trade. So I think it's always been said about the Kyle Shanahan offense that any quarterback can look good in that offense. Apparently, any quarterback, except the quarterback that they traded first or 3 first-round draft picks for, can look good in that offense. So,
talk about bad trades, right?
Well, again, this is what happens with the league, though. The league always catches up. Brock Purdy was coming in as kind of an unknown late-round draft pick. and surprised a lot of people. But now there's a lot of game tape on him, and I think that's kind of the big reason why he started to kind of look mortal these last several games.
Yep.
I mean, he's also played good defenses, but
I mean, I personally think their weakness on that team is him as quarterback, and the only other weakness I could think of on that team really would be their kicker, right? Like they got a rookie kicker, right? And so it's like, I mean, that's kind of pulling out, that's kind of a read, but but it is right. Like you want to, he's missed a couple kicks too, so I don't know. I'd be worried if I was a Niners fan about my quarterback.
Yeah, and a rookie third-round kicker at that. So,
yep.
I mean, that's a huge price to pay for a kicker in the draft. And to kind of cement your point a little bit about Brock Purdy, going into this last week, he was 7th in the NFL in missed open receiver rate at over 10%. So you got to hit the gimmies, and that's something that he's not been doing lately.
Well, and that's the thing too. Shanahan is so good at drawing up plays to where, like Adam was saying, that first read, right? Well, a lot of times that first read is open because Shanahan is such a great play designer, right? We know that it's a very favorable system to a quarterback, right? So, I would be concerned. Like I said, I'm not totally sold that Purdy is this, top 10 quarterback. And I've seen a lot of chatter, especially on like 49er fan pages that I read the comments. Everyone, he's top 10, he's elite. He's, it's like, I pump the brakes a little bit, guys.
He is still a second-year player. He is growing. He is learning. He obviously had the skills to not be Mr. Irrelevant, and every team passed on him. But every team passed on him for a reason. There are definitely things in his game that he needs to work on. And I think now that NFL teams have had a chance to watch film, to diagnose a little bit of what Brock Purdy's weaknesses are, now we're starting to see those flaws come to the surface, and teams are taking advantage of opportunities.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing there as well. I mean, if they do take another quarterback in the draft, or if they trade for another quarterback, they're going to get far more for Brock Purdy in trade than a late 7th round pick. So they've got a guy there currently that's maybe a placeholder quarterback, maybe has some upside. Certainly going to get more for him than they spent, and they're not paying him money. I mean, their cap seems to be the most elastic cap I've ever seen in my life at the moment, and it's not a coincidence that they're probably paying the cheapest quarterback in the league, certainly the cheapest starting quarterback in the league. So that's not a coincidence. They've done a brilliant job with him, honestly. I mean, if you think of rookie quarterbacks picked in the 7th round that go on a deep playoff run in their first year, that's a short list.
Is there another one besides Brock Purdy?
I was just going to say, he might be it.
I mean, I can't name them. So, but it was a really impressive first year. It's a bit of a rocky second year, but it still had highlights. He still had good games in there. I mean, they started. I mean, it was basically Christian McCaffrey putting the team on his back for the most part. But like you said, Mitch, it's a really good roster around him to support him, and a really good scheme. I know Trey Lance couldn't do it, and they spent a lot more on him than they did on Purdy, but he's not the only quarterback to struggle in that system in recent times with all the star power they've got. So I think he's doing a great job. I hate to say it as a Seahawks fan, but I think people have jumped on Purdy very quickly.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm still those are still 2 games circled on my calendar because you've got to be watching them. I mean, just take out even if you just take out the San Francisco defense, which is the scary unit on that team. We've seen them score in this league. I mean, they can score in bunches, they can score quickly, they can score effectively. And as much as I think the Seahawks have done a really good job with shutting down offenses this season, it's really been in the red zone that we've had issues. And so if teams get inside the 20s, it's been pretty automatic, especially in the run game. And with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, that's got to give you pause. I mean, again, I think that may be one of the big reasons why we brought in a guy like Leonard Williams, is to have even more of that rotation. The more and more I think about this move by the Seahawks, even though the draft capital is a lot, and we talked about earlier in the podcast how, as well as the Seahawks have been drafting of late, these are some primo picks that they're kind of giving up for these players. But if the idea is they know that they're going into the meat of their season, which we are doing, I mean, we've got a murderous row of competitors coming up in this late stretch, especially the end of November. that the idea about keeping your guys fresh and making sure you've always got those warm bodies along that defensive line, this seems like more and more just a really, really smart and savvy move by John Schneider and co.
Yeah, I actually love that Leonard Williams trade by you guys. I saw that break yesterday, and yeah, compensation's a bit more than what I would want to give up. Second rounder, right? And I think a fifth, if I wasn't mistaken, was the compensation.
Second rounder next year, fifth rounder the year after.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine who's a Giants fan, and he's
Poor guy.
Wow, yeah, poor guy for sure. But he's been all about Leonard Williams, and I can tell you, as a Vikings fan, from that playoff game last year, Leonard Williams wrecked that game for the Vikings. Right? He was in the backfield almost every snap. I mean, so he is a damn good player.
Yeah, I really wanted to look. I was really looking forward to talking about this, and I really wanted to go into the draft capital side of this. I mentioned very briefly in the comments on the YouTube before I joined the call. I mentioned on our Twitter yesterday that the worst case scenario for that Williams trade is he plays the second half of our season, and we can't come to terms with him, on a deal that fits our cap, and he moves on. And it looks on the face of it like you're trading a second round pick and a fifth round pick, right? But the compensatory, if we can't come to terms, is a third in 2025, right? Mm-hmm. So worst case scenario, he leaves after half the season. We paid him half the vet minimum, which I believe is $620,000 for the year. It's nothing. Yeah. Our second round pick is looking lower and lower in the draft as we go. It's almost a third at this point. If it stays, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to continue and be the number 2 ranked NFC team by the end of it, but we're up there at the moment, so we have to hope it's something like that. So if it's the 58th, 57th, 56th pick in the second round, he leaves at the end of the year. Essentially, that fifth round 2025 pick that we gave becomes a 2025 third round pick. So it's actually nearly a third round pick and an upgrade by 2 rounds in 2025. That's far more palatable for a Seahawks fan than a second and a fifth. Sure. If he does ball out and he makes our D-line explode and we become serious contenders and we can extend him, then it's been a good trade for a second and a fifth.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that's
again, I don't disagree. It's just been one of those things. It's been, especially over the last several seasons, I mean, almost a decade now, when the Seahawks have rented one-year players by throwing high draft picks at other teams. It really hasn't worked out. Whether we're talking about Percy Harvin or
Jimmy Graham,
Jimmy Graham. That was like a 3-year terrible experiment. But or Sheldon Richardson or Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, these 1-year rentals really haven't worked out for the Seahawks. And yes, this is a different kind of player, and we're in a different scheme, and obviously it's a completely different team. And the front office has looked more and more like they've been working really well, like whether it be signing people, bringing people in like Nwosu, or trading picks. So I have faith, but I really don't. I would hate to see another 1-year rental, even if we get that compensation coming up. It's just it's pushing stuff down the line, and it's tough for me to swallow that.
Yeah. Do you also start to feel like our picks are worth more than they used to be because of our recent success rate as well? They feel, even late round picks at the moment start to feel like, I mean, a 5th round pick in recent times has been Tariq Woolen. So what a 5th round pick meant to us before doesn't feel like a 5th anymore. It feels more like a 3rd, doesn't it? So I do get your point, Adam, and playing devil's advocate here, really coming in from a different angle and talking about what the bottom line looks like. But for me, I think it's a move that has a really high ceiling for how transformative it can be. And I think the bottom line and the level of risk just isn't quite as high as people think. I do feel, though, like we've drafted really well, especially in the second round. I know we've had 4 of them in 2 years, which helps. Thank you, Denver. But, it's one of those things, isn't it? We've got a really good recency bias when it comes to looking at the draft. But a second round pick we used that year could have been an absolute bust. So at least we've got a known quantity. And one final note on Leonard Williams, because I could talk all night, but I will finish by saying just this: every player on our defensive line is a playmaker this year. Every single one of them. Whether Nwosu was obviously out for the year, but from Nwosu over to Mafe. every single player has the capability to create a huge tackle for a loss or a sack, or just make a big play. You stick a guy like Leonard Williams in the middle of that line, needing double teams in some plays and things, you're opening doors for every single one of those playmakers on some snaps. So I think he may not be 11.5 sacks anymore. Maybe those days are over. Maybe he's more 7 or 8. He's still a guy you have to stop and scheme for. It's still going to allow the other guys to feast. So I think that's a serious impact player we picked up for 600,000 on the cap this year. Huge.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, and I know Robbie's itching to jump in on this, but I think I'm going to lead him. I'm going to give him some meat here to chew on, Rob. So, because we talked a little bit about this before we came on the pod, but you're adding a guy like Leonard Williams, who, I mean, he looks like coming out of college, he was really a 5 technique tackle. He's obviously played some 3 technique and even some nose tackle, depending on the scheme fit. But with the guys that we've already got in the meat of that middle, whether it's Jaron Reed or Mario Edwards or Draymond Jones, I mean, who are you taking out to put in a guy like Leonard Williams? And are we just taking snaps away from guys that we don't need to be taking snaps away from?
No. So the way I see it, Leonard Williams gives us more flexibility. Right now, who's going to replace Nwosu? You can't say Leonard Williams coming in to replace Nwosu. They play different positions. So right now we have Darrell Taylor. Okay, are we going to give Derek Hall more time over there, let the second round pick kind of grow and blossom this year with added snaps? Or do we take somebody like Draymond Jones, who played 30-40% of his snaps in Denver from a 2-point standing position? Do we let him on rush downs line up at that outside linebacker position? And then now you have Reed and Williams in the middle, Draymond Jones on the one side, and Mafe in nickel. Or if we're in sort of a base 3-4 look, you still have Mario Edwards down in the 3-point stance on the line. That's a good way to increase your goal line. That's a good way to increase your run stopping ability in those brotherly push kind of, what do they call that? The brotherly shove?
The tush push.
Tush push? I don't know, whatever. It's a good way to stop those short yardage situations by going to a formation like that. And Draymond Jones is familiar in rushing from a standing position. Then it also beefs up your rotation. If you watch the game last week, our defense was gassed. I mean, they were on the field for 37 minutes of that game due to offensive issues, which Adam and I will go into in great depth on our recap show here either tonight or tomorrow. But this allows for those big guys to be able to get a break. I think it's wonderful. I hate to say that Leonard Williams is a rotational piece because I think he'll play a bigger role than that. I think the person who gets hurt by this trade is Darrell Taylor, who was getting a lot of those Nwosu snaps. But this is all about versatility. And I think if used properly, this could be an amazing trade for the Seahawks.
And it's a brotherly shove, Rob.
Thank you.
Yes.
What's quite interesting for me as a guy that's so focused on the NFL draft and college football and things. I was huge on Mike Morris this year at Michigan, who we ended up taking, and I'd called him to the Seahawks. I'd mentioned it on our pre-draft process that I thought he would become a Seahawk, and he did. And the reason I said that he would be a Seahawk is he's a really versatile guy. He's 6'5". He ended up being 295 when we drafted him, and we took him from a 4-eye position and put him into a 3-tech defensive end, sort of bare front kind of guy. Well, Leonard Williams is 6'5" and he's 305, and he plays 4-eye. He plays 3-tech. I'm not going to say he plays nose because he doesn't really, but he plays some shade stuff at 1-tech. So that's a really, really similar profile to something we drafted with the intention of moving from the position that he can play at 4-eye and moving him inside. And I think a big part of that was that the Seahawks occasionally play big end and put a larger, heavier sort of defensive end on one side instead of a linebacker to reinforce and set an edge. Now, with Nwosu gone, we're playing Darrell Taylor more at that side. And we all know Darrell Taylor's shortcoming is setting the edge and reinforcing the run. So you've now got Leonard Williams there who can play big end, or as you say, could play inside with Taylor Reed, and then you can move Draymond Jones out there. We know that Jaron Reed has played as a larger end as well. Obviously, he's bulked up for nose, so he's not really fit for that currently. But that flexibility and versatility that comes from having a guy that can play the edge and inside means you can simultaneously go three front to four front, without changing personnel. You'd never want to see a big guy running off the field when someone's about to snap the ball and catch you unaware. So having guys that are versatile and can play multiple fronts all the time on the field, huge benefit. It's exactly what Leonard Williams gives us. It's exactly what Mike Morris was drafted for. So they've missed that guy this year now that he's on IR, and I feel like they've got that versatility back with this pick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Clint Hurts really kind of come into his own as a defensive coordinator this season. We've seen what he can do moving these chess pieces we have on defense around, whether it's in the backfield with guys like Julian Love or Jamal Adams. And obviously the rotations look really good up until a Nwosu injury with rotating those guys in and out on the fronts. I guess it just looks like we've got a lot of moving pieces here. And this late in the season, when it looks like the defense has finally kind of solidified itself. Me and Robbie already talked about this again, and Robbie, go ahead and please throw what we were talking about before when I give this to you. But are we going to see a step back before we see this defense get back on target?
There's always an adjustment period. It doesn't matter what happens. You could bring in Warren Sapp in his heyday, and your defense is going to have a slight adjustment period. New players need to learn all the calls. They need to get used to communication, and you're going to hit that really hard in practice. But there might be some growing pains, but it's really easy to just throw your guys back in there, get everything back on track, get the new guy rotating in. I don't think we're going to see a drop off, but I think it will take a game or two for this defense to come to its full potential.
Oh, man, I've got 2 games before we see the 49ers, so maybe that's a little bit serendipitous.
All right, so we do have a trade that came in just under the wire, and that is another team involving the NFC North. They're Viking Mitch.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Talk about the Green Bay Packers a little bit. They went and traded cornerback Rasul Davis and a 2024 fifth-round pick to the Bills for a 2024 third-round pick.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, got a little bit. A little bit of compensation for him. I don't know what his contract status is or what the for Rasul Davis as far as like why they're trading him, and I don't know. But yeah, I'm surprised they're not trading more. But then again, the Green Bay Packers are one of the youngest rosters, if not the youngest roster, I think, in the NFL. So they don't really have a lot of pieces to trade, right? They don't have a lot of those older veteran guys that they would be able to get a lot of compensation for, and they're obviously in a rebuild mode. Jordan Love, I think, is the big story there. After 32 years, they finally have a quarterback that is not a Hall of Fame first ballot quarterback, right? So that's painful.
Well, I
for them,
I
anyway.
think it's a little early to decide whether or not Jordan Love is going to be the QB of the future up there. He hasn't looked spectacular, but he's made some plays, and obviously they've got a lot of young cast members there around him. So there's going to be some growing pains there, and I think there's a little bit of recency bias too. When I remember when Aaron Rodgers first stepped in for Brett Favre, he was lambasted too for like, this guy was not worth the high draft pick that we spent. Obviously, he had some growing pains too. So let's give Jordan Love. Not saying that they're going to do this, because teams are pretty quick to move on from players these days, unless you're the San Francisco 49ers, apparently, when you keep a guy around for 3 years for no reason. But yeah, so I think Jordan Love let's see what he looks like next year if he's still on that same roster.
Well, I think one of the things with to that point, one of the things with Green Bay is they've done a really good job at drafting the guy to take over for their older veteran quarterback, right? So they drafted Rodgers when Favre was 35, right? Going into his age 35 season. They drafted Love when Rodgers was going into his age 36 season. So they have been an organization that has had their stuff in line and together to make sure they got a good young potential star quarterback to take over when their current Hall of Fame quarterback ages out. I just and very true, Adam. Jordan Love definitely has potential still. He has all the talent in the world. I mean, he's a first round NFL draft pick, right? He can make the throws. From what I've seen of Jordan Love, I think the biggest thing is in between the ears and his decision making, and then also his consistency and accuracy. Right, he misses a lot of easy passes, and he doesn't like. I watch him, and he just doesn't go through his progressions very smoothly. Right, his decision making is fairly poor.
Playing like a rookie.
Yep.
I mean, I know he's not a rookie, but he's playing like a rookie quarterback. This is his first year starting. So
I think one thing though that I've noticed, and for the remainder of the year, of course, I think maybe towards the end of the year, Love shows a little something, but I think it's pretty safe to say he's not going to reach that level of Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre level for this season. So either way, this season the Packers are stuck with having a quarterback that's not at that level. So good for them. They get to experience what everybody else in the NFL has had to experience, right? So they're the one organization that for all those years, right, have always been able to get bailed out. You can't tell I'm a Vikings fan, right? A little bit bitter about this, but but that's the reality of it, right? So they've done well at making sure they have a replacement quarterback at all times. But I am pretty skeptical because even when Rodgers started, you could see he struggled a little bit, but he had a couple games early in his career. And I remember one against Dallas his first year starting where he really lit it up, right? And you could see that potential. And with Jordan Love, man, I have not really quite seen that this year. The Saints game, maybe, right?
Yeah,
they came back 19 down in the fourth. It was good, but
it's really rare that you get to see a guy come out and have the arm talent that Aaron Rodgers has. I mean, the man can literally just flick his wrist and throw a ball 70 yards. So, it's not really an apples to apples comparison. But to kind of keep going with some of the trades, one guy we haven't really talked about a ton on this, and this continuing with talking about the NFC North, and that's Montez Sweat going to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
The one thing that they've not been able to do since getting rid of Mac was generate a lot of pass rush, and they've gone through quite a few guys along that D line to try and bolster that up. Do we think Montez Sweat is the guy that's going to fix that? And what does this really mean for their season? Because the Bears haven't even looked like they're in playoff contention. So this is a weird trade to be. Maybe they're looking at the future and they think they can re-sign this guy. And I think Robbie, you said that you think that's probably in the pipeline when you send a pick like that for a guy like this that's up in a contract year. But
the way I look at, if I'm Montez Sweat, I'm telling you whatever you want to hear, and then I'm walking out of the door in 8 games. But they had to have had a verbal, yes, we'll get a deal structured. You don't send a second-round pick for an expiring contract and not expect something to happen. But Montez Sweat should, get some holy water, put up the cross sign. Like, he needs to do what he needs to do to protect himself from whatever is oozing out of this Bears organization, because it has definitely got a little bit of unlucky little voodoo in there. Maybe they made the Saints mad and somebody down there on Bourbon Street decided to throw a hex on the Bears franchise, because I don't know what's going on. This move puzzles me. I really like Montez Sweat as a player.
Yeah.
Why Bears that second round pick is going to be like a top, like number 34, probably.
Yeah. And they've also got 2 first-round picks. The Bears are another organization where they've got a lot of draft capital. So I can understand. I don't understand them having to trade a second when the 49ers only had to trade a third for Chase Young. But again, injury history, I know played a factor in that, and also the contract they're going to have to sign later. But yeah, there's been a lot of the moves that I have seen I'm very puzzled by, because it hasn't looked like, there's some obvious ones. I think the most obvious one was the Eagles trading for Baird, because that makes sense, right? You're a contending team. You know where your holes are. What are we weak at? Okay, it's our safety position. How do we bolster that up? The rest of these moves, yes, I think in some cases they fixed an issue. Like I said, Montez Sweat going to the Bears, they needed a pass rushing specialist. That's the one thing they lacked, is getting pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. But it doesn't really move the needle for an organization like the Bears. I don't think the Bears are all of a sudden going to be a playoff contender by bringing in a guy like Montez Sweat. The same thing for, the 49ers. Does Chase Young really move? Your defense is already number 1 in the league at getting after the quarterback. How much does Chase Young really move the needle for you?
So one thing with the Bears, Seahawks, Mitch, you want to go for it?
No.
Take a stab at this Montez Sweat?
Mitch, you go.
Please, Mitches, please.
Yeah, I know. We don't want
Mitch,
to start. Yeah. So one thing with the Montez Sweat trade that we have to keep in mind is this is the same organization that traded a second round pick for Chase Claypool last year, right? So keep that in mind, right? They've kind of got a history of making some questionable trades, we'll say, right? And so that's one point. The second point with the Bears, obviously, we all know that defensive line is atrocious. I mean, they've got nobody on that D line. So, getting in something or some kind of talent, I think is good, especially if they feel like they can lock them up long term. The Bears are really in a pretty advantageous situation, and I'm going to be really curious to see how they handle the Justin Fields situation next year, because there's a very real possibility that they have the number 1 and number 2 overall pick next year in the draft, right? Because they have the Panthers pick. And so are they going to go Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I would.
That's what I would do, right?
And then what do you? I mean, in that case, they got to trade. They should be trading Fields right now. Would be that. I mean, you're not his draft stock is not going up at this point.
I would have traded him to the Vikings.
No, I don't know. Well, the Vikings were interested in him in the pre-draft process that a couple of years ago when he came out. But, I think the one thing with Fields, why play him at this point? Like and the reason is because of the injury risk. Like if you're going to go that route and you're going to go Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd almost lean on the side of, not even playing him, because what are you going to get? Like that offense, or not that just the offense, the entire team is bad, right? So like, is Fields really going to do anything more than he's already done? Right. Probably not. And then you risk the chance of him getting injured and then he's not worth anything. Right. So I don't know. The Bears situation is interesting.
You know what they're going to do, or what Fields brings to the table for the Bears organization, is he becomes a sack sponge for Caleb Williams' rookie year, so that he can sit and learn. They can beat the heck out of Fields behind that offensive line. And what they're doing is correcting the mistake they made with Fields by learning and not doing that to Caleb Williams.
So they're going to pull up. They're going to pull the 49ers and rest the guy that they drafted. I mean, like, not exactly, because they, Caleb Williams is not going to be a 7th round pick, obviously. But yeah, I mean, look, I love quarterback controversies. I love especially when they're in division. And I love the San Francisco 49ers having the issues with Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, and Jimmy G. So yeah. I mean, cool. I love the drama. Let's bring it on, NFL. The Bears are an organization that loves doing that too. Anyway, so
yeah, I was a bit confused by on the surface of it. I think that nobody really saw the Bears as buyers in this window, but the player they've picked up could become a cornerstone for a really, really good D-line once they've invested their capital in this up-and-coming draft. I mean, they're second highest on draft capital behind the Cardinals, who apparently have half the capital in the entire draft this year, who enabled them to, who enabled them that much. But I think if you're looking at putting that much draft capital into your team in one draft, maybe it makes sense to get a cornerstone like that's already established in the league, has already sort of shown the caliber of player he is, and allow him to guide your huge draft class you're about to haul in. And if they do trade out of that first overall and they do keep Fields, which to me would be a ridiculous decision, but they make a lot of ridiculous decisions. They are the Bears. So if they do trade out of it to someone who really wants that top quarterback, then that draft class gets even wider, and at which point that's going to be a really cheap roster. And if those rookies start kicking on, they'll then be looking to add players like Montez Sweat. Why not get him when he's available if you think he's your guy?
I feel like we've seen this show before, though. I mean, isn't this what they did when they after Matt? I mean, they got Mitch Trubisky. They went and traded for Mac. I mean, they've played this game before, not to.
I mean, bad franchises bad franchises and bad GMs stay on that merry-go-round. They make the same bad decisions in a 4 or 5 year cycle repeatedly. We've seen that a lot. But you have to keep taking your shots, or you never get out of it. If you stop making those shots and stop trying to make those splashy plays with your roster, then you'll stay in that rut. But that's the NFL. It's the game they play.
One thing I think that the Vikings could help the Bears out with that number 1 overall pick. I mean, I'd be willing to make a trade with them. I mean, Caleb Williams he'd look pretty good in purple, I think, right?
So Justin Jefferson going to the Vikings or going to the Bears for Caleb Williams. I mean, Jordan Addison looks like he's enough on offense. So,
I mean, if we're talking real brass tacks, I'd make that trade all day long because quarterback is the position you need in the NFL, right? I mean, teams win championships without wide receivers, right? And I love JJ. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's great. He's best receiver in the NFL. But I'd rather have a quarterback, right? I mean, at the end of the day. So
Jefferson, Addison, Williams, and Hawkinson. That is an insane. That is an insane set of weapons for the possibly the best quarterback we've seen out of the college football in a long time. I think the only one who comes remotely close is the Jaguars pick. The name eludes me, and I don't know how it eludes
Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah,
that's the previously most polished quarterback
which is 2 years ago. We keep this happens every year in the draft, and I love the pontification that I get to hear. We haven't seen a player like this since. But Andrew, we haven't seen a player like this since Andrew Luck. Okay, well, we haven't seen a player like this since now. Why can't I think of the?
Oh, you could go
Patrick
John
Mahomes.
Elway or
Patrick Mahomes. I mean,
Mahomes,
that happens every time. It's like, we haven't seen a player like this since last year. Well, that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
I'm just thinking of those quarterbacks that come out that are like, that's a generational talent, right? That was the John Elway, that was Peyton Manning, and then it was
they said that about Trevor Lawrence, and they said that about
Lawrence. Yeah.
It gets thrown around a lot for a generational talent. We seem to have one every year. And that's from last time I checked, that's not how generations work.
Well, I think there's certain guys that are, there's certain names that really stand out to me anyway, from that, if you look back in the history of that pre-draft process. And like I said, that just listed a lot of them, the Elway, the Manning, the Luck.
I was 2 years old when John Elway came out. I mean, I vaguely remember John Elway's heydays, but it was more about the end stretch of his career after they changed uniforms and he won 2 Super Bowls in a row. That's the John Elway I remember.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, I know this isn't a draft podcast, but this does kind of lead me into: are we seeing the talent pool get bigger and bigger for the NFL every year? And I mean, are we eventually going to talk about draft expansions? Me and Robbie have obviously talked a million times about what does the league do to kind of corral these players so that we have a developmental league or something to that extent. Because the NFL is the only major league organization that doesn't have a minor league counterpart.
It's
mind-blowing.
NCAA.
Well, that's what they've been using. They've been using that. But no offense to the NCAA, they don't develop players. They find that they get talented players and they throw them into a system. But I mean, Pete Carroll said it during his last press conference. They were talking about, hey, is it a lot easier to train running backs to be receivers and blockers because now more college programs are using them that way? And Pete Carroll said, you would think so, but no, we still have to teach them fundamentals of how to do that out of a backfield. I have very little faith in the developmental skills of the NCAA.
And no other position signifies that more than offensive line, right? Yeah. These college programs just they do none of these offensive linemen in any service before they come into the NFL.
Stand up and push people.
Right. Yeah, they're doing a very poor job. So, but yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I would love to see a second league as a second tier league, and then once we're talking about tiers, I would love a promotion relegation system, but that's never going to happen because NFL owners are greedy.
Yeah. Did we talk about this when you and Josh were on a couple of weeks ago, Mitch? I don't know if we did. Me and Robbie went hard on this for it must have just been a phone call, but it was like an hour talk about what would a relegation system look like now that the USFL and XFL have combined. If I was The Rock, I'd be pitching this hard. I'm like, hey, look, how about this? How about next year after this, whoever the bottom 2 teams are in the NFL, they get relegated down to the XFL and we get to elevate somebody. If you want to build, I don't know how the NFL is going to react to that, but that would be just a banger for the XFL.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, obviously, being a Brit, it's basically baked into every one of our sports that, the real jeopardy is finishing in the last few spots. But American sport, because of the draft system, the real jeopardy in American sports is mid-table mediocrity. You don't want to be picking in the middle of the draft. You want to be a contender, or you want to tank. It's by the time you hit mid-season, no one really truly wants to see their team lose. But if you're if you're going to end up in those spots where you're picking high in the draft, that's at least a small bonus. When there's the threat of relegation, it becomes a huge problem. And in British sports, you have teams going into administration or winding up and going out of business. So relegation for some fan bases can also mean picking a new team and traveling across the country to go and watch them rather than watching your local team. So careful what you wish for. Because
that's easy here in the U.S. Just living in Albuquerque, I never thought I'd see more Cowboys fans than when I lived in Texas, but I have since moving to Albuquerque. We have Cowboys, we have Raiders now that they're in Vegas, and we have the Denver Broncos. So I'm just surrounded by this triangle of ineptitude. But yeah, I do think. I don't think Robbie believes this either. I really don't ever see the U.S. adopting a system like relegation, even though as amazing it would be. And I think it would also, if they want to expand the brand into Europe further or any other place on the planet, that's one great way to do it, because you'll get buy-in right away, and not just from like the little, spots in America where they have these XFL or whatever the USFL or whatever the heck it's going to be called now teams, but. Well, yeah, but the league needs to do something. I do think the NFL is it's eventually going to get to a tipping point where we just have so many players that are available at positions. Right now there's just Lael Collins is still on the street, and this is a viable starting tackle in the league.
Do you think that in some part that huge wealth of talent that's being pumped into the NFL is in part causing the lower draft capital in trades?
Yeah,
Do you think the competition is with players maybe drives down the capital for trade?
Absolutely. At least in some cases, obviously you still see. Still the Seahawks had to bump it up to a second round pick for Leonard Williams, but yeah, definitely. And not just that, but you can just talk about what positions are made. Look at running backs. Look at anybody that's not an interior rushing defensive lineman. There are positions that just their stock has gone way, way down, even though they're still integral to what happens on the field. They're not being valued in that way, at least as far as compensation goes.
Safety is another one. Safeties and running back. Running backs, that's the easy one to point to and go.
You wouldn't know it if you're a Seahawks fan that safeties are being devalued.
I was going to say
$72 million in safeties.
Yeah, well, it's literally a third of our capital is invested in one position right now. It's insane. Don't get me wrong, I love our guys. I don't want to lose Diggs, Love, or Adams, but $70 million is a lot to pay for three guys.
Well, you look at the Vikings situation. Yeah, you got Harrison Smith, who's making a pretty penny. He's getting towards the end of his career here, but look at Josh Metellus and Cam Bynum, a second and third year player. And in fact, Josh Metellus, who was drafted in the 6th round the same year that the Vikings drafted Lewis Seen in the 1st round, and Seen hasn't even barely seen the field, right? So you see a lot of these safeties. The Vikings have done a great job at hitting it, that position in particular late in the draft. And I think it's similar to the running back. There are talented guys that get pushed down the board because of the supply and demand issue, right? There's a ton of them, right? So it's
we got Kenny McIntosh in the 7th round, and I know we haven't seen him this year, but that is the guy who, go back and watch his college tape. This guy is a baller. I fully expect him to, when he gets integrated in this offense, we may actually see the Seahawks accomplish a screen pass that goes for not negative yards.
Well, and McIntosh is a really good all-around player, right? He catches the ball. He's got good pass blocking ability. He does a little bit of everything. Well, I think he's kind of the player that he does everything good, but nothing great, right? He's not like super elite at anything. Well, maybe pass catching. He has really good pass catching chops, but
zero drops in college.
Right. Yeah. He's It's hard to criticize that pass catching ability. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you a fun Macintosh stat before we move off Macintosh. He finished college, I think, with the highest quarterback rating of all time. I think because he threw one pass for Georgia. I think he threw one pass for Georgia, and it was I think it was like a 35-yard bomb. So it was an unbelievable throw. But I think because of that, he left college as a running back with like a 240 QBR rating. So it was huge. So over 200 rating. So you say he's a versatile guy. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to. I mean, it saves you a roster spot if you don't have to elevate a third quarterback on game days, because you got guys that can do it. I mean, I remember the days when Cam Chancellor was our emergency quarterback. I don't think we ever got to see him throw the ball, but I remember that he was named emergency quarterback. So,
yeah. Well,
hey,
that's the reason Penny Hart made the roster for all those years he made it. He was that emergency quarterback, and he could actually get it done. So that you can't overlook, guys like that have that skill set.
Hey, listen, guys, I was just going to tell you that I got to jump off here. I got a couple of things going on. So I appreciate the invite and being on the podcast.
Thanks for coming on, Mitch. Always good
to see
absolutely.
you.
Hey, yeah. If you have a minute.
Yeah, I do. I have a minute.
What do you think is the most questionable trade? And what do you think is the most underrated trade that we've seen?
Oh, boy, put me on the spot, huh? So most questionable trade.
Wow, it's not.
I can go. I can give you a minute if you want. I can give you a minute to think.
I think the most questionable for me was going to be the Montez Sweat, and I think it's for the reasons that we talked quite a bit about that particular one. And the other one is the most surprising. Or what was the other one? What was the other
under
question?
The radar.
Under the radar.
Yeah, isn't going to get a lot of buzz, but will have a lot of impact for the team.
I'd have to look at all the trades again. Honestly,
I can give you a list right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got Devin Peoples-Jones going from the Cleveland Browns to the Detroit Lions. We've got Chase Young, obviously going from the Commanders to the 49ers. We've got Ezra Cleveland going from the Vikings to the Jaguars. We've got Josh Dobbs, of course, going from the Cardinals to the Vikings. We've got Montez Sweat going from the Commanders to the Bears. We've got the Contavious Street going from the Eagles to the Falcons, another interior D-line guy that we haven't talked a lot about on the podcast. Obviously, the Seahawks acquiring Leonard Williams from the Giants, and the Eagles trading for Kevin Bayard. Those are the big ones. I don't know if I'm missing Robbie. Am I missing anything in that list? That's just what I've got.
Yes, there was the one we mentioned earlier, Rasul.
Rasul Davis.
Quarterback going from the Green Bay Packers to who did he go to?
The Bills.
The Bills.
So the Kevin Byard one I really like for the Eagles, but I think my choice is honestly going to be DPJ with Detroit. And I think one thing that's a little bit surprising because he's a little bit more of a deep threat, right? And so I'm wondering like what's going on with Jameson Williams, right? Like what's the deal with that? Right, they make that trade for DPJ. I mean, and yes, I think the Lions definitely need that receiver help, but it takes a bit for him to get into that system and whatnot. But the Lions have, best offensive line in football, in my opinion. They've got some nice weapons. I think adding another receiver, that wide receiver too, and I know guys like Josh Reynolds and who's the other one I'm thinking of? But they've had a couple guys step in.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Leonard, and Williams got going. Not Leonard Williams, sorry, but Williams got going in that Monday night game. He was heavily involved in the offense, whether it be on screen passes or just coming up over the middle. So they're obviously looking to incorporate him more to the offense. I don't know that Devin Peoples-Jones is going to take a lot of snaps away from a guy like especially a first round pick, like Williams. I think this is more about getting a guy that's going to be in the return game. Obviously, Devin Peoples-Jones brings that to the table. He is a speedy guy that's been used on kickoff returns before. But I think this is just I think this is just them going, hey, we know we've had issues with injuries going in later in the season with pretty much all of these receiver guys. Let's make sure that we've got somebody that can step right into that role again. I agree. That's a pretty underrated play. And the Lions already look like I mean, if anybody's going to take the NFC North right now, it looks like it's the Lions.
Well, and another big thing about DPJ to the Lions that we have to remember is he's a big receiver. He's a big boy, right? And some of these other guys they have, whether you're talking about Amon-Ra and Amon, honestly, he is more of a slot receiver, right? I mean, he's great. He's one of those what I like to call star slots, right? You've got like Cooper Kupp is one of those, right? You get those guys that are stars still from the slot. They primarily play in that position, and so they needed help, in my opinion, outside, even with Jameson. But I just right away, I'm like deep threat thinking DPJ, and I'm like, man, what is going on with Jameson? But yeah, you're right. He was using that Monday night game. So, or last night, right? So, yeah, it's Tuesday today. I'm starting to lose track of my days here. But I that as far as an underrated, because it's really not a big signing, but a big trade, I should say. But last year, he really showed some things to me, in my opinion, from my perspective anyways, with the Browns. And it's not like they have great quarterback play, right? And he was still, consistent, right? So.
Yeah, I think for them, it was just about, they've already got, Amari Cooper, and having traded earlier for Elijah Moore, Devin Peoples-Jones really wasn't getting on the field much because, he was that X or Y receiver, depending on who else they had on the field.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, yeah, that's great. Robbie, you said you had your picks already in mind for the answers to that question.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just say thank you, Mitch, for coming on.
Yeah.
You have to run.
Yeah.
Once again, you're welcome anytime. Let's just get these schedules lined up and we'll have you on.
Yeah, let me know. Send an invite if you ever want to, hear some more about the Vikings. I could talk ad nauseum about my team. So, add a little bit extra about the rest of the NFL. So definitely follow it closely. So, but yeah, it was definitely nice meeting you as well, Seahawks Mitch, and nice to see another Mitch that likes football as much as I do. Right. So
always good to meet a Mitch, and also what a lovely house you have.
Yeah, I know. I was just telling these guys about the fireplace that I built by hand. This is just kind of like anyway. Everyone, have a good evening, afternoon. Skol Vikings, right?
Yep. Take care. Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Yep. Mitch.
Bye.
A lovely guy. Great.
Yeah, no, he's great. We've had him on before. I think when we played the Vikings.
Preseason.
Was it earlier this year or last year?
It's preseason.
Preseason
game. Yeah. All right. So I guess the same question to you guys. What is your most questionable draft of this most questionable trade of this trade deadline period, and which is your under the radar trade? If you want, I can go give you time to line those up in your.
No, I'm fine. I agree with the Montez Sweat thing. I don't really see the Bears as a team that should probably be investing in the now. They should probably rebuild that roster and then invest. But I can only assume, as I mentioned earlier, that they're looking to start getting some more experienced pieces in ready when they're at a good value or available. Trading for a guy that isn't available is always going to be an expensive business. So taking guys when they're a good fit for you and things and the trade bait is not sky high. Maybe that's a good thing. So, but I just didn't see them as a buying team.
Yeah.
So that was for me.
And then what about the under? You said what was the underrated one? Yeah.
Yeah, I would have gone DPJ, but just for variation, I'm going to say Chase Young, and I know that's an interesting call because he's obviously a big name going to a contender. But I really didn't see them investing at this point in that position because, you're looking at a guy there that's going to want, what do you think? Projected next year, probably 20 million?
He's going to want
20 million.
Joey Bosa. He's not going to sign for less than what Joey Bosa signed for. So,
well, they've cornered themselves with that. That's a bit of a strange situation. However, when I say it will go under the radar, what I mean to say is he's going into an already established fantastic defensive line, and people would look at him going in and thinking maybe he'd struggle for snaps, maybe he'll struggle to make an impact amongst that line. I actually think that they're going to be able to put out a fresh, dynamic defensive line every snap, and I think he's going to really thrive from the fact that he's on a defensive line that needs a bit like the Leonard Williams thing. I think you've added another big player onto a line of them and I think he'll get a lot of freedom to attack the quarterback in that team, in that line. So I think that one actually, I mean, if he put it this way, if he'd have gone to a lesser team that was in more dire need of a defensive lineman, he probably would see 3 or 4 sacks less for the remainder of this year, I think, because if you're the big guy on a small team, you're double teamed for the rest of the year. Right?
Yeah,
so
Montez Sweat. I don't know if Montez Sweat gets another sack this year because he's the only guy on that Bears defensive line that people are going to be paying
for the opposite reason.
Yeah, exactly. I would put the Chase Young among my what the most disappointing trade because I definitely don't like seeing the 49ers get more talent. And I don't like anybody in the NFC West getting more talent. But I think for me, the shocking trade was Josh Dobbs. I mean, it looked like, I mean, he came. I mean, again, the Cardinals traded a draft pick to get him over to Arizona, and the idea was they thought, okay, this is the guy that's going to fit right into the system. I know they've got Kyler Murray coming back, but he's already got an injury history. Plus, they don't really know what the future holds. Are they going to be gunning for a guy like Caleb Williams? So bringing in a guy like Josh Dobbs and then trading him after he's just kind of started getting in the groove of that offense makes zero sense to me. It makes zero sense that the Vikings would trade for Josh Dobbs just because, again, why is somebody trading draft picks for Josh Dobbs? Yes, I know he's a usable quarterback in this league. There are usable quarterbacks on the street right now. Case Keenum, is been inactive for the Houston Texans. He knows that offensive system. He's familiar with those players. That one would make more sense. And not that I think Carson Wentz is a viable quarterback, but I do think he's more talented than a guy like Josh Dobbs. And if the Vikings were looking to stay in contention, he would have made a little bit more sense. So that's the most surprising to me for a host of reasons. As far as the most underrated one, it's hard for me not to pick the Leonard Williams one, even though that's obviously gotten a ton of buzz. But just because I don't know what it's going to look like along this defensive line. I mean, I know that what Robbie's thrown out there about the versatility and being able to kind of move him and then obviously shift some of those bigger guys over to help out in that when we want to go big and defend the run, especially in the red zone. But the Seahawks, they haven't. I mean, defense has been chugging along. Defense has been getting better and better every week. I think the only reason why we ended up giving up 20 points last week is because they were on the field for almost 40 minutes of that game because of offensive ineptitude. But is the Seahawks just kind of going back to the roots and saying, look, we know we can win championships with the right defense. Let's build on this strength. Let's make this defense the best it can possibly be, and we'll get the offense figured out.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of see where our recap show is going to be going. Spoiler alert, yay, we won, but
but did we?
Not how we wanted. Okay. For me, you guys have kind of nailed a lot of the ones that I was going to spotlight in the.
So you get for not going first, Rob.
Hey, it's all good. I offered, right? I did offer to go first, and I offered to wait. So I would say questionable, right on with Viking Mitch there with the Bears. And then I can see why the 49ers added Chase Young, but why? Like they're going to have a heavy rotation just to keep those guys happy because all of their defensive front players are 70, 80% of the snap kind of guys. And you don't have 70 or 80% of the snaps to give them all because you're not playing a 6-down front.
Or are they going to play a 6-down front from now on?
Yeah. I'm going to go for my official questionable trade. I'm going to go all the way back to October 6th. And that was Miami trading for Chase Claypool. Now they didn't give up a ton, but after what I saw of him going to the Bears and the issues that he had there, and then the issues that he also had in Pittsburgh, I'm not touching that player with a 10-foot pole. Right. Yes, he's good. Yes, he has potential to be
young, talented receiver. Player, highly drafted.
I don't value wide receivers though. I don't, I would rather go test my luck on somebody who has similar traits and skill set, but has a better attitude. So that's somebody who I find questionable just from, I don't want the headache that comes associated with that player. And then
Yeah, I mean,
go
there
ahead.
was a guy that the Seahawks had that we cut off of our practice squad that fits that exact mold. Tall, athletic, speedy wide receiver, but would be a lot hungrier than Chase Claypool has shown to been.
Exactly.
Talking about Landers.
Yep,
Matt Landers.
Yeah.
Man, I think he's still kind of on the old Seahawks ghost roster, right? I think
Well,
he's been
if
on and
my
off the
prediction
practice
had
squad
come
a couple
true and the
times.
Seahawks had moved DK Metcalf, what I wasn't predicting. We already said that that's not going to happen, but there were rumors out there. Then I think Matt Landers would have had a place on this roster right away.
Yeah. Okay. So, but my under the radar trade is from yesterday, from Monday, when the Eagles sent Contavious Street to the Falcons. The Falcons basically got him for free because the Eagles sent Contavious Street and a 7th round pick to the Falcons for a 6th round pick. So, I mean, the Eagles are going to finish more than likely in the latter half, right, of that round. So, like, they're really giving up maybe a round and a half worth of draft capital there at the back of the draft. Great.
It's nothing.
It's nothing. Yeah. And
this is a guy who, like
here,
you would say, I mean, he had played 50+% of the snaps the previous year before they brought in Jalen Carter.
I want to say it was 40, mid 40s, 43, 44, something like that. So, and he's a
good player. I mean, anybody that can crack that defensive line for the Eagles is obviously a good player. So yeah, that's a great call for underrated.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody who can contribute right away. They're a team that needs a little help there stopping the run. He's going to beef up that defensive line. He brings experience because he's been on a winning caliber team, and he's going to be hungry as well because, like I said, he's been pushed down that depth chart. He wants to get back into that playing rotation. So he's somebody I think is going to come out and really make an impact, especially with Grady Jarrett going down with a torn ACL this year for the Falcons. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here a little bit earlier than we may have originally planned, but it seems like a natural ending. Do you guys have any final thoughts here on this trade deadline and perhaps the Seahawks move or not moving today?
No, other than I'm glad I wasn't watching any of the talking heads today because it seems like they always try and hype up the trade deadline and it's always just underwhelming. I mean, not saying weren't some impactful trades, but it's not like, it's not like a bunch of other than the Commanders just offloading their entire young defensive line front, not named Ron Payne. It wasn't a lot of moves. So
I think that the Seahawks have actually had quite a good sort of trade deadline. I know we did it yesterday, not on deadline day, but we've done all right here. I mean, we're looking like a contender, and we made a move that made us a stronger contender. And I think you can't ask for a lot more than that from your front office when you're looking good to explore all options to make you better. And I don't think I know we've talked about the draft capital, and it may well be thrown away. We don't know how this will work out, but it may be a little bit thrown away. But we've taken a shot. We've taken a shot to improve the roster, and we've done it in a fairly responsible way. We've not necessarily done anything that hurts us with our cap down the line. We've not done any. You know what I mean? We can walk away from this. We can walk away from this move if it doesn't work out without there being ramifications in future cap scenarios. So I feel like they've taken a shot. They've done something to make us more of a contender, and they've not screwed us down the line. I think that can be commended. I'd rather see that as a Seahawk than a front office that does nothing or trades away. A key part of what would be our push for a deeper playoff run. We've done well. We've improved, and I'm happy.
I agree with that. I think the Leonard Williams move is going to give us flexibility. I was initially shocked by the capital that was given up, but when I dug more into the details, and especially with the Giants taking all that cap hit this year for us, it opens up possibilities, and I like the versatility that it brings to the defense. Not making any moves today, I'm okay with. The only move I would have wanted them to make, if they were going to make any move, was potentially addressing a longer-term issue at right tackle. If the news that's coming out about Abe Lucas is true, in that he's not getting back as quickly as they thought he was going to be. And this is an issue that's more of a chronic issue and not a structural thing with his knee. So that would have been the only move I would have liked to have seen. The only way that the Seahawks could have done a better job, in my opinion, at this trade deadline is maybe if they traded their offensive coordinator for somebody who can call plays.
Literally,
Get the
anyone
Shane
else.
Waldron zing in. Way to go. Just under the deadline, Rob.
Just under the deadline. All right. Thank you all for watching or listening to the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast. We'll catch you next time. As always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Hawks.